this little lift. Ooh, that's loud. Good morning. So my name is Chaplain Jessie Ford, and I use gender-neutral pronouns. My name or initial does nicely. I'm a pagan Sufi Unitarian Universalist, and we could call that a Su-you. we have Jew-yous and Boo-yous, so why not Su-yous? You know? Okay. Together, these religious identities really do form the ground and the center of my life and practice. And so today, I'm going to try to weave together Memorial Day on the one hand, leading into the Rebirth with Flowers, yeah? Because this is the time that this congregation wants to do the flower communion. So when we remember those in the U.S. military who died in battle, that's what we do on Memorial Day. And so I'm going to be having some comments about war and what it does. This is a sort of a trigger warning. If you think this might be difficult for you, feel free to just get up, move, leave, whatever's your jam. Please keep yourself in your body and safe. Many simply celebrate this day by relaxing, which is great. Resting, we all need that. But many others, particularly the families and friends of fallen people in the military, experience it as a profound day of mourning. And here I want to go off script and just remember my friend Ron Nasco, who died many years ago. He lost both of his legs in Nam, and he was a beautiful member of our Corvallis Fellowship for so very many years. We learned so many things from him. Miss him deeply. In May 2021, the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs published a little leaflet called America's Wars. It's a fact sheet, and it estimated how many troops have we lost between the American Revolution and 1991? 651,031, which seems very low to me. But here's the thing, they died in 11 named wars between 1775 and 1991. These wars stretched between the American Revolution through the brief Desert Shield, Desert Storm operation in 1990-91. When this report was published 2 years ago, a link to a Department of Defense site was given for adding statistics for what they're calling the 12th war, which is what they said in 2021, an as yet unfinished global war on terror, which included Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Iraqi Freedom. These were classed as ongoing conflicts that spanned the 20-year period between October 2001 and October 2021. And so I went to check it, and that military website now returns a 404 error, not found, which includes some explanatory information about what exactly a 404 error means on that .mil site, which I've never seen an explanation before. So clearly, they feel they need to explain. And for those of you who may be interested, I have some handouts that have those two websites on them, so you can look them up for yourself. I've got them in my briefcase. Okay, here comes the maybe harder part. We know now that the intergenerational trauma of war is profound and affects far more people than the fallen warriors themselves, their immediate families, and the people on the other sides, so to speak, of their actions. Many, and perhaps even most survivors and those around them must actively deal with the physical, mental, and emotional and spiritual consequences that they bear. The less visible mental and emotional injuries are now characterized often as PTSD, four little letters that describe unimaginable pain and suffering. More recently, an additional injury has been identified, the truly unbearable spiritual burden of what is now called moral injury. That state of the soul when one realizes that one has indeed absolutely violated one's core beliefs and then has to live with that for the rest of their lives. The book that introduced that concept, which is now a field of study in its own right, was published in 2012 by Rita Nakashima-Brock and Gabriella Latini. I had the honor of studying with Gabriella during my years at one of our two UU identity seminaries, Stark King School for the Ministry. And she's quite amazing. She's a Waldensian, a member of a dissenting community within the Roman Catholic community in Italy. There's so much more that can and should be said about war, beginning with what kinds of activities should really be included in that term. I mean, we have the war on drugs. We have the war on poverty. That's complicated, right? And what is missed by considering only the so-called named wars, right? However, that's a topic for another day. It really is. We could spend a long time with this, and arguably we should. But perhaps you'll take a moment today or tomorrow to think about people who serve in this way, perhaps thinking about the day in a different way than you have in the past. War truly is hell in so many different ways. It changes people, and then these people change other people, and the effects trickle, or maybe more correctly, pour down the ages from generation to generation, whether or not stories are shared. And perhaps someday we can talk about the epigenetics of trauma here, and its opposite partner, the epigenetics of resilience. Let's not forget about the epigenetics of resilience, okay? But again, another day. Because after the immediate effects of wars are over, we humans do our best to heal our bodies, our lives, our families, our homes, our countries, and our world as best we can. After violence, after death and destruction, after the mourning and the anguish, can come personal, familial, and national peace, perhaps of a sort. It takes a great deal of resolution and determination. It takes a great deal of courage and vision and hope for the future. And in a way, exactly out of such situations was born what is now the Unitarian Universalist ritual of the flower celebration, or as its originators, Norbert and his wife Maja Čapek, refer to it, the flower communion. So, a little bit about the Čapeks. Norbert Čapek was born in 1870 in Bohemia, which was then part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. He was raised Roman Catholic, but converted to the Baptist faith at age 18. Easily said, but at the time it was a highly controversial move in that time and place, because the Austro-Hungarian Empire was a Catholic empire, very clearly. And it resulted in his being kicked out of his aunt's and uncle's home in Vienna, where he had lived and pursued higher education for 6 years. He was actually raised in a tiny little village in Bohemia, and he graduated from his school at 12 years old and went off to Vienna to do this thing. And as he was exposed to the larger world, he became really interested in the Baptists. He became a Baptist minister and missionary, and as World War II approached and then began, his life became increasingly dangerous because of his nationalistic and anti-Catholic writings. So he fled to the U.S. in 1914, where he continued his Baptist ministry, but eventually he became disillusioned with that as well. Now, I'm condensing a whole lot of theological content without saying anything about it, but forgive me, because we have 20 minutes. And if you're interested, I highly recommend this book, Norbert and Čapek, A Spiritual Journey by Richard Henry. It's available on Amazon and probably other places. And it's all about his life and Maja's life, too. So he set aside the Baptist faith in 1919, and 2 years later, he and Maja and their children joined the first Unitarian Church of Essex County, New Jersey. This wasn't just a random thing. He had friends who were Unitarians, and they had been in conversation for a long time. And in fact, it was a Unitarian who introduced him to the Baptist Church. So, because we're open thinkers, right? It's like, you don't have to do us. You can, what makes theological sense to you? So they joined this church, but they were longing for their native homeland, partly because after the war, Czechoslovakia became an independent country. It was no longer the northern fringe of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And they felt torn between what Norbert called in some of his writings two fires. On one side, the Unitarian services with their inspirational atmosphere. On the other side, news from my native country about the religious awakening that I helped to prepare, you see, in his work as an anti-Catholic Baptist. Anti-Catholicism, you have to take that with an understanding of the socio-political culture and context at the time. Part of it was theology, but part of it was practice, the practices of the church. So, which he felt were not in the best interests of liberation of the human spirit for all. So they returned to Bohemia in 1921 to plant a Unitarian church, and this was with the support of the then president of the Unitarian Association, the Reverend Dr. Samuel Eliot. And so he gave financial support from the American Unitarian Association to establish this congregation in Prague. And Čapek wrote to Eliot that I would use the press to the uttermost to push the case which I regard holy. And so, true to his word, literally within hours after debarking in Prague, he gave a press release to the Prague newspaper describing his family's ocean voyage, which was important because there were a lot of Czechs and Slovak people returning to their post-war homelands. So this was a whole cultural discussion. Let's just say that under Norbert Čapek was a little guy, right? But he had a big voice, and people were always surprised by this. He also did a lot of weight training when he was a kid. So people would pick on him, and then they would be surprised. So he was, sturdy. And he had a really electrifying ministry, which included introducing hymns into Unitarian worship. Norbert Čapek did that. And in fact, he himself authored many hymns. And in fact, there are 3 in our blue-gray hymnal that are authored by him. Within 20 years, the congregation that the Čapeks planted would become the largest Unitarian church in the world. It had 3,200 members. Yeah, right? So we're talking about 1941. Well, clearly his ministry was deeply inspiring, and it was a partnership with his wife, Maja. It's important to remember this, because it wasn't just Norbert, it was Norbert and Maja. Norbert lived his life big. He was always trying to find truer ways to live and help others live in alignment with his or your values, okay? And on June 24th, 1923, on the first anniversary of the founding of this new Unitarian church in Prague, the Čapeks introduced what we now know as the flower ceremony, or as they and many UUs actually would call it. A lot of UUs call it the flower communion. In fact, we do over in Corvallis. So if you've done the math, you realize that this is the centennial of the flower communion, and so it's a big deal online, and you can go and look up all sorts of stuff about it. And this is what he wrote about that ceremony. He said, this was right after he did the thing. We are trying to find new expressions of our religious life very slowly and carefully. Whereas the dedication of a child, weddings, and burials were kept rather close to the general Unitarian custom, we have made a new experiment in symbolizing our liberty and brotherhood in a service. I'm sure he would say personhood. I'm absolutely convinced these days. But seriously, right? Our liberty and brotherhood in a service which was so powerful and impressive that I never experienced anything like it. Well, okay, dude, you did it, so, you know. But listen, here's what he says. Everybody was supposed to bring with him a flower. In the middle of the big hall was a suitable table with a big vase, or many small ones, where everybody put his flower. The sight of the many beautiful flowers was wonderful, and I invite you to take a moment to just feast your eyes on this beautiful collection of different flowers that everybody has brought. We had a common song. I read 1 Corinthians 13. Do you remember that one? No? Here, let me give you a little taste of it. Yes, exactly. Wow, we've got biblical scholars here, but not everybody knows this. So for those of you who don't, let me just give you a little. As Brooks said, this is the way chapter 13 of 1 Corinthians starts. If I speak in the tongues of mortals and of angels but do not have love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give away all my possessions and if I hand over my body so that I may boast, but I do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. And then I'm skipping a bit, but for now we see in a mirror dimly, but then, that's in the end times, we will see face to face. Now I know only in part, then I will know fully, even as I have been fully known. And now faith, hope, and love abide, these three, and the greatest of them is love. So that's what this Unitarian minister, which has very deep, right, the Unitarian and the Universalist faith has very deep roots in the radical fringe of the Protestant Reformation, which is why so many people got in so much trouble and were persecuted and put to death, things like that. Anyway, he goes on to say, we had a common song. I read 1 Corinthians 13, and in my sermon, I put emphasis on the individual character of each member flower, okay, on our liberty as a foundation of our fellowship. Then I emphasized our common cause, our belonging together as one spiritual community, as brethren. And when they go home, each is to take one flower, that is. Each is to take one flower just as it comes without making any distinction where it came from and whom it represents, right? To confess that we accept each other as brothers and sisters without regard to class, race, or other distinction, acknowledging everybody as our friend who is human and wants to be good. Okay? So, to sort of end this story about the Čapeks, when World War II erupted, he was arrested by the Gestapo in 1941, spent a year in prison, and then sent to the concentration camp in Dachau, where he died in 1942, poisoned by gas. Maja had gone to the U.S. in 1939 to help raise funds for the refugee program because people were starting to stream into the U.S. To the extent that the U.S. would allow them to stream in, which is a whole other story we could talk about. But this refugee program was sponsored by the Unitarians in partnership with the Quakers. And she stayed there throughout the war, serving as a Unitarian minister in Bedford, Massachusetts, and helping refugees. She only learned of her husband's death after the war was over. She died in 1966. So today we honor all of this, right? The courage, the vision, the love in the midst of the unimaginable by this ritual of flower communion. What you have brought makes a unique and uniquely beautiful collection of flowers, representing this gathered, uniquely beautiful collection of souls, which is you, including me. So what we'd like to do now is to redistribute these flowers to you, and they're just going to be passed back so that everybody hopefully will have a flower. And like loaves and fishes, magically there will be enough. Each of you will leave with a part of the heart and spirit of this fellowship. This is an occasion for smiles and celebration as we celebrate the flowering of this part of our Unitarian Universalist heritage. And when the distribution is done, I'll read a couple of other things as we move into the meditation part of our service.
So the thinking is we can bring them to you, but I'm thinking that might be messy because there's a lot of them up here. The other part is maybe you can come down this aisle and then go back that way, and you can come down this aisle and go back that way. You could just make your way out here. Somehow make it orderly and do the best you can. If you wish to take a flower, there's many to choose from. And maybe we do this in another
Thank you. We are connected. We are connected. Yeah. Thank you, dear ones. As we think about these things, I'd like to read you another passage from our blue-gray hymnal. This is reading number 724. It's called Consecration of the Flowers, and it's written by Norbert Čapek. Infinite Spirit of life, we ask thy blessing on these thy messengers of fellowship and love. May they remind us, amid diversities of knowledge and of gifts, to be one in desire and affection and devotion to thy holy will. May they also remind us of the value of comradeship, of doing and sharing alike. May we cherish friendship as one of those thy most precious gifts. And may we not let awareness of another's talents discourage us or sully our relationship, but may we realize that whatever we can do, great or small, the efforts of all of us are needed to do thy work in this world. And finally, I'd like to end with a haiku from the beautiful book, right, that is given to all newcomers here. I received one the first time I came when you didn't know anything about me. I just came to visit. This says, and the author is Lynn D. Finney, Morning Haiku, Windows to the Light. Hidden within us is a bud of light we are here to make blossom. May it be so. Thank you.